Welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today's Wednesday, December 19th, 2018. Hope everyone's having a great work week so far. We're halfway through it. Just a couple more days, and I know most of us are on vacation for Christmas, so the time is fast approaching. Hope everyone is having a great holiday season thus far. Let's take a look at some solar wind speeds, guys. Sitting at 573 kilometers per second. Now, I did notice this uptick today, and especially about a couple hours before we even started the program, we were in the low 500s. So we've seen the increase over the past hour go up just a little bit from 560 to 573 kilometers per second with a density of 6. Our sun is blank, no sunspots to speak of. That's 3 days in a row now, and a total of 209 days for 2018. As we are fast approaching the end of the year and end of the month as well here in 2018. It's hard to believe that we're already going to be talking about 2019. Our TCI warmed up just a little bit, up to 32 billion watts. It was around 31.2 yesterday, or I'm sorry, on Monday when we last reported. KP indice sitting at a 2 with the 24-hour max at 2. And really nothing to speak of on the SDO right now. There are no large coronal holes that are facing Earth at this point. The area is peppered with minor coronal disturbances, I should say. Nothing large, and still trying to figure out why we are having the solar wind speed increase. I'll look a little more into that into the future. Kind of get an answer for that, because I'm pretty sure NOAA predicted a storm for the 18th and nothing really happened. Now here we are taking a look at, that's the front of the sun, and as we go around to the back we have some activity to speak of. Now 2 of these active regions are below the equatorial region, one just slightly above that, but that one really doesn't appear to be too much to speak of at the time. We do see a pretty decent sized coronal hole coming around the eastern limb, so there's a chance that we might see some more increased solar wind speeds here in the next 10 to 12 days to come. But right now all is quiet, and we will continue to monitor those active regions on the other side of the sun. Taking a look, now look at this, guys. We didn't report on Tuesday. Monday we reported the spike of the 1360.7 value. We dropped all the way down to 1360.5631. That's pretty significant considering that we don't really, here lately it's been baby steps when it goes up and down. But in the last few days it's been very erratic as well as erotic. I guess if you're into TSI, this could be erotic. So looking at the readings for December 12th, 2018, sorry, December 10th, 2018. Look, I'm all hot and bothered, all right? The TSI really gets me going, I guess. And 1360.6425. I guess I'm a geek.
It's my birthday.
It's this geeked out stuff here about science that gets me all going. It's got me all choked up, Mari. Sorry. All right, let's move on with the show.
Dear Lord, Jake.
Strong explosive eruption at Kachino-Era-Bujima volcano. Pyroclastic flow generated here in Japan. After regular small eruptions for many weeks and then a complete pause in activity, this appears to be the largest explosive eruption there in quite some time. Volcanic ash rose to only about 6,500 feet above the crater, and large rocks were seen spewing from the crater. However, some part of the volcanic ash cloud could continually obscured by meteorological cloud, preventing precise height and measurements. So in other words, we were looking at somewhere between 6,500 and possibly 10,000 feet, but the clouds are obscuring the actual measurement for this particular eruption. So goes on to say the JMA maintains a level 3, do not approach the volcano site, since August 29th of this year. The JMA reported that during November 28th through the 3rd of December, intermittent events at Kachino-Era-Bujima Shindaki crater generated plumes that rose as high as 4,900 feet above the crater. The last 10 days, November saw plumes as high as 6,800 feet above the crater rim. So slightly and slowly, we are seeing the activity of this particular volcano go up just a little bit. Not a lot, nothing to panic about, but here the last couple days, we've seen some interesting articles appear on the Watchers. I want to give a shout out to Teo for his excellent work that he does at this website. And for those of you who don't know, become a supporter of theirs on Patreon. And if you notice, I am looking at this article ad-free. And this is kind of the perks that you get when you participate with their Patreon page. Ad-free articles, which I know everyone has to make a living. I'm not disrespecting that at all, but some of us that don't really care for the ads, you just go to the top of the page. And let me move me down a little bit, see if we can even see that. Nope, we can't. All right, sorry about that. So there is a sign-in spot at the top of the page. You sign in after you become a Patreon member, and you will get ad-free reading from here on out as long as you continue your membership with the Watchers on their Patreon. So definitely well worth it, and I highly recommend these guys for your absolute #1 news source when it comes to extreme weather, volcanoes, and earthquakes. The Watchers. Take a look here across the pond. Now, there is definitely some strong coincidences here for us. Our brothers in the UK will experience very, very similar weather that we're going to be experiencing here as well, especially on the East Coast. Thunder and torrential rain will see half of Britain at risk of terrifying flash floods, which are set to trigger travel chaos at Christmas. Scotland and England have combined a total of 57 flood warnings, with areas such as Aberdeen, Dundee, the Inverness under threat of flooding, as well as counties in the south such as Surrey, Berkshire, Hampshire, Dorset, and Devon. Northern Ireland will also face extreme weather, with Belfast also being slapped with a severe weather warning for looking and winds up to around 116 miles per hour. The southwest coast will be battered by rain this afternoon before heavier rain descends on the UK later tonight. The Met Office was forced to issue a danger to life weather warning as heavy rains and strong winds will batter parts of the UK. Gusts up to 65 miles per hour and heavy rain are expected to double later this afternoon, with predictions up to 50 millimeters falling in some places. The Weather Service issued a yellow danger to life warning between 5 a.m. and 9 p.m. tonight for London, southeast and southwest England and Wales. However, that has expired as we are now 9 p.m. Eastern time. They're about 5-6 hours ahead of us. Hopefully all is well. Those downpours come as many families embark on grueling travel plans early in a bid to reduce stress caused by endless transport problems. Rail strikes by multiple operators, engineering works, motorway closures, and flight cancellations expected due to the extreme weather are set to cause misery for the 6.8 million people expected to travel across the nation to be with family and friends this Christmas. So we are looking at snow will blanket the EU and Europe, leading into dangerous spells of ice sweeping into the UK from the west. Taking a look at the warning maps here in Scotland. BBC weather forecaster Ben Rich warns significant snow will trigger below freezing temperatures across the continent. A big area of low pressure has wound itself up across the northwest of Europe. From satellite picture, you can see the big curl of cloud. We've seen some very wet and windy weather across the side of the British Isles. Also down into Iberia, and as we go into Wednesday, we push that cloud of rain further east. He added it will be pumping into some cold air that brings the potential for some snow. So I will give a little brief update for what we are going to expect here in the United States for Christmas, but it's very similar to what we are going to get in some parts here in the United States as well. And we'll talk about heavy rain for a little bit longer here. Article that was found on AccuWeather talking about the 100 inches that's been received in Wilmington, North Carolina. I read over this, and we're still dealing with rivers that are swelled over their river banks right now. This is the scene at the PD River in Pamlico, South Carolina on December 14th. The continuance of rain and flooding that we've had there since Hurricane Florence on September 17th. The river in this location has slightly higher crest on November 19th and set a record of a crest of 29 feet after Florence on September 17th. So these areas, it's almost like we've seen major flooding in North Carolina, September, November, now December, as the storm that we are getting ready to talk about here just in a little bit. But it's talking about the 100 inches in Wilmington. As of 9 a.m., Wilmington, North Carolina has measured 100 inches of rainfall thus far for 2018. And I say thus far because technically we have a few more days left, and with the storm on its way, and this should add to the totals. But guys, the normal annual rainfall for Wilmington, North Carolina is 57.61 inches. We've doubled that this year. We've crushed some records off and on with floods from Florence, from the snowstorm. We got 25 inches of snow in parts of North Carolina. That melt will add to the flooding. More extreme weather news. Storm that spawned a tornado into Washington, now moving towards the eastern United States. Let's read here from ABC News. A major snowstorm is now moving out of the northwest, but not before spinning up a tornado west of Seattle, delivering damaging winds of nearly 90 miles per hour in Oregon and feet of snow in the Cascades. The major storm is weakening today, but as it moves into the Rocky with lots of wind and some snow. Our attention moves east as this western storm combines with the southern storm to bring heavy rain and severe weather from Florida to Maine. What we're mainly watching right now is Florida and the East Coast, and what's curious to me is where the flood warnings are and the watches for North Carolina and South Carolina. This weather is going to go right up the East Coast. Flood watches have already been issued for 8 states from Florida to New Jersey. The southern storm will move north from the Gulf Coast into Tennessee River Valley, bring heavy rain from the Gulf Coast to the Carolinas Thursday. This is at 2 p.m. As we go into Friday, heavy rain will spread into the I-95 corridor from Washington, D.C. to Boston and into Maine. This is Friday at 1 p.m. Some areas along the East Coast could see as much as 3 inches of rain. And as you see the spots in yellow, parts of North Carolina, the East Coast, Central, and of course the northwest part of North Carolina, the northwest part of South Carolina, parts of central Georgia, Atlanta, possibly could see up to 3 inches, and they're calling for more rain in Florida. And what's going on? Well, this is a complex system here. East Coast storm to strike during peak of Christmas travel, northwest to stay stormy. So while we continue to see storms enter Oregon, like we saw just the other day, we'll also be dealing with weather on the East Coast. Storms with the greatest potential to disrupt travel will focus on the east and the northwest in the days leading up to Christmas. Some of the best weather-related travel conditions are likely over the southwest and portions of the plains through Christmas. Delays and disruptions due to the weather in these areas are likely to be brief when compared to other parts of the nation. A record-breaking 112.5 million are expected to travel by means ranging from their car to airliner, bus, or train, AAA had stated. Here we go. Major rainstorm in the eastern U.S. to cause substantial travel dangers and delays. Here is where the UK was talking about heavy rain and wind. This is where we get it here. Starting on Thursday, and this is technically the beginning of our Christmas travel season. Christmas is on Tuesday. A lot of folks get the weekend off, maybe taking a vacation day for Monday, and are going to make themselves have a 4 or 5 day weekend here. Major storm is forecasted to bring drenching rain and thunderstorms beginning on Wednesday near the upper Gulf of Mexico coast. However, the risk of slick roads is likely to expand northward from along the Interstate 10 corridor on Wednesday, December 19th, to areas from the southeast to the parts of the Midwest and Northeast by the weekend. There is potential for damaging thunderstorms centered on the Florida Peninsula on Thursday, and there is the conditions map right here. As you see, all of the state of Florida, except for the Panhandle, is going to be in the pour. Now, also, their rain looks a lot heavier than what they're going to get on the East Coast. We saw 3 inches possible. There's a possibility we're seeing isolated spots of 5 to 6 inches of rain to fall in parts of Florida. As the storm strengthens, moving northward, winds generated may become strong enough to knock over poorly rooted trees and soggy soil. Motorists venturing on secondary roads and wooded areas during their travel should be wary of this added risk of trees coming down during the storm. Here is a Friday outlook at the map. This storm is well underway by Friday. We are actually here in upstate New York are under a flood watch right now for Friday and Saturday, as we are expected to receive anywhere from 1 to 2 inches of rain ourselves in this part of the country. Now, behind this is colder air, and we see a mix of snow and ice in northwest Ohio and northeast Indiana, into parts of Michigan and northwest Indiana, Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota. You guys will see some snow chances as well. At least 16 locations in the eastern U.S. have already recorded their wettest year on record, and a couple dozen more currently are experiencing the third wettest year on record. Airline delays in the east due to episodes of fog and low cloud ceilings are likely. While the same storm will bring rain initially, change to snow is likely on the backside from the middle part of the Mississippi Valley to the Great Lakes region. Now, this is by Friday. By Saturday is when we'll start seeing snow on the back end of this. Potential rain to change to snow includes the cities of Chicago, Milwaukee, Indianapolis, Thursday night into Friday, Detroit, Cleveland, Cincinnati during Friday, and perhaps Pittsburgh during Friday night. More storms to hit western U.S. and into next week. The train of storms that began to affect the Pacific coast last week will continue to blast the Northwest into early next week. Each storm has the potential to increase the risk of flash flooding, mudslides, while rounds of snow over high country raise risk of avalanches as well. On Thursday, the next storm train will hit the I-5 corridor in western Washington to the coastal northern California with drenching rain, while most of the snow will fall past a level with the storm in the Cascades in the northern Sierra Nevada. Rain may end as snow late Thursday night. Snow from this storm will then spread inland over the northern Rockies on Friday. Additional storms with the coastal rain and mountain snow are scheduled to roll ashore in the northwest, including one on Saturday night. Snow may fall as far as south as central Sierra Nevada and higher elevations of the Great Basin within that storm on Sunday. So really, it's been boring here the last few days throughout the United States. But here at the end of the month, we are going to see a little bit of uptick. Chance of some snow in the Midwest, Northeast, just prior and during Christmas. It's been bleak. I thought maybe a week or so ago we were going to see a white Christmas in most of these areas. But now the temperature swing is just too erratic. And even less than 6 days away from Christmas, the GFS is still showing an up and down trend. So really, these are just wishful thinkings, in my opinion, here from AccuWeather.com. But it says cold winds, lake effect snow are forecast for the eastern Great Lakes region this weekend in the wake of a big rainstorm. There's a potential swath of wintry travel conditions that may extend well beyond the snow belts of the Great Lakes during the first part of next week. The latest indications are that there may be 2 weak storms instead of 1. The weaker of the 2 features may gather enough moisture to produce a swath of snow showers or a light wintry mix from the Great Lakes and the Ohio Valley to parts of the Northeast on Monday, Christmas Eve. Rain showers would extend farther south of the lower Mississippi, Tennessee valleys, and to Texas. So we will keep our eyes on this storm that's coming up. It sounds like we got some weather to deal with over the next several days. Moving right along, not really grand solar minimum related, but just something to mark as we all are sky watchers in one way or the other. The winter solstice is falling on December 21st. Will mark the shortest day of the year, as well as full moon in the night sky. This upcoming full moon is named Cold Moon, or the Long Night Moon, which is The term has come from Native Americans. The two events don't perfectly align. The peak of the full moon will occur on the 22nd at 12:49 p.m. However, to the typical person viewing the moon, it will appear full for several days. And not only are we going to be looking at this gorgeous, beautiful, cold moon, guys, but also when you look up tomorrow, there are chances for parts of the United States that will see not only this full moon on one of the longest nights of the year, shortest days of the year as well, but we're also in the middle of the Ursid meteor shower. So lots to look at here. A good little article here from Forbes. I'll leave the link in the description if you guys want to check it out and read a little bit more about the event. Yellow Vest revolt spreads wild climate claims by Whistler Ski Resort Environment. Look, I'm covering more of this because I've noticed lately that our president is also using what's happening in France as an example of the failing climate treaty in Paris. Which, by the way, folks, we are technically still on the hook for until 2020. As much as Mr. Trump says he's pulling us out, that's fine. But unfortunately, we're in it right now until 2020. I have an interesting piece I want to show, and that's part of the reason why I had this article pulled up as well. But the mainstream media is really taking off with this riot, this Yellow Vest anti-carbon tax revolt is what they're calling it. And I don't know, I guess Macron made some, concessions about this carbon tax. Still hasn't calmed things down. So obviously it's more than just these carbon taxes, but the carbon tax was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. It's already affecting the middle class enough. What about the lower class that's already struggling? And now they have to pay more in taxes for carbon. So I see where the problem started with another tax increase. And don't make no mistakes about it, folks. This is directly related to the treaty, the climate treaty. So, and these were minor increases in taxes, I guess. So imagine when we talk about on this channel where we see articles where they want drastic changes now to help curb climate change. Can you imagine the increase in carbon taxes when they say drastic? What they would have to charge to get people to, because basically what they're doing is they think that if they charge more for fossil fuels, that people will become less dependent on them because it won't become affordable, it'll become a luxury. And people will find other successful ways to get their power needs. And yes and no. I know it costs a lot of money to get your solar power started up. There's an initial investment. So if you're a type of person that has to have fossil fuels to depend on for heating, electricity, and you want to get away from the fossil fuels because not just what it's doing to the planet, but what it's doing to your bank account, you still have to have money to make that initial investment to get your house wired up to solar panels and whatnot. Get started with that. So there's no end solution for average people like me and you. I don't know about you guys, but I don't have a few grand sitting around ready to just rewire my house for solar power. And honestly, I'm kind of in a predicament anyway. I got a lot of trees in my property. So am I going to be able to harness enough energy if I just solely relied on solar and wind power? Well, that's where our governments or other governments will tell us that we consume too much, so we need to cut back on consumption. I get that. I get that too. But again, I've noticed the mainstream media is using the carbon tax as the reason for this riot to begin. And also they're talking about it in Canada. And they're talking about how they don't want to pay another tax increase for carbon. And they're talking about it in Brazil. And they're talking about it in Saudi Arabia and Russia and Kuwait. So here lately, I think mainstream has been a little interesting. And another reason I say that is because when I go into, and Mr. Mark Morano has been a busy guy here lately. This guy has been on Fox Business News, and I was going to play this interview. Again, I'm a little disappointed because I don't think Mark, he has so much going on in that head of his that he doesn't really get to say exactly what I think a lot of us wish he would just come out and say, that CO2 is not warming, that man is not causing climate change. And both of these guys are dancing around. They don't want to get to the gusto here. Now, the person that's conducting she calls this a debate, but this is not really a debate. This is, to me, this is just another example of how mainstream media does not understand what's happening to our climate and the science that's involved. But let's go ahead and take a look at this interview here. I'll break it. I don't know if I'm going to go the whole way because it gets kind of, bizarre at the end, in my opinion. But here's some of the interview.
When it comes to most policies, the left wants to exert as much control over your daily life as possible. We'll take the latest suggestion for new Democrats in Congress. Joe Biden's former economist, Jared Bernstein, writes in today's Washington Post that the solution to climate change is brand new carbon taxes and government incentives for alternatives. Joining me now to debate this is Brad Johnson.
Now, before we get in any further, government incentives for alternatives. And what she means by that is these subsidies that places like China they're saying no more. We're not giving any more money for people who switch to wind and solar. So that's the first sign right there that some of these politicians are disconnected to reality, because if these other countries or continents like China are saying no to subsidies for alternative energies, so how are we going to be able to afford that if the Chinese government can't afford it? Let's listen in.
Founder of Climate Hawks Vote, as well as Mark Morano, founder of Climate Depot and author of the Politically Incorrect Guide to Climate Change. All right, Brad, America's actually lowered, I think, our carbon emissions under Trump, so why should Americans sacrifice our way of life for these new carbon taxes?
Actually, my understanding is that carbon emissions have gone up pretty significantly in the last few years, and a lot of what we've seen
I don't think so.
Now, I don't like Miss Ingram. Normally, I don't really care for her, but I applaud her for pushing this guy to give us evidence on why he says that we've had higher amounts of man-made emissions when the Trump administration had reported that it had been reduced by 2.7%. But he claims it's not. She comes out with a number. He doesn't even come back with a number himself. He just says it's way higher without evidence. Typical left side defense when it comes to a climate debate. There's no real evidence being peddled here.
In the last 12 months,
we can
correct?
go.
In the last 12 months?
Your viewers can go and check out at EIA.gov, the Energy Information Administration, which has those numbers.
Greenhouse gas emissions have gone down 2.7% in the last 12 months.
Well, we can go to the record and check.
Okay, so answer the question.
It's funny to me because, she had a number. Now look at the look on Mark's face. He knows he's been set up here on this one, and he's enjoying his colleague here who is stuttering through the answers. But bravo to Laura once again for really putting the screws to him on this. She at least came out with a number, which the 2.7% has been consistent from what I've heard. But this man here provided no information, didn't even have a number, couldn't even ballpark it. Instead, he tells you to go to a website that maybe I'm under a rock, but I've never heard of that myself. And it was almost like she expected him to get on his BlackBerry and pull up the numbers himself. But anyway, let's continue to listen.
if we accept the premise of the question, the reason to act on climate change is because of the harms that it's causing to Americans in the world already today.
Are you going to cite the phony 97% of all scientists?
Oh, no, I was going to talk about...
Okay, because that's been debunked.
I was going to talk about...
Everyone like trots that out, like, oh my God, 97%. Then all of a sudden you dig into it, when you can unpack that in like 4 different ways, and it's completely phony.
It's crazy now that mainstream, and Fox News is mainstream. I don't, whether you agree with their reporting or not, that's another question. But Fox News is mainstream, and mainstream is now coming out saying that consensus 97% scientist theory has been debunked. I mean, I'm glad to hear. I didn't know that. I'm glad to hear that. We believe that over here, that it's not a 97% consensus. But again, I'm surprised to see the mainstream media kind of pick up a little bit and start to call out these climate change alarmists for what they are.
But go ahead.
No, I was going to talk more about what we've seen in Puerto Rico and in California and all across the country and the world, where we're seeing billion-dollar climate disasters on the rise. And this is real American suffering.
None of that. I mean, I'm a conservationist and I'm a real outdoors person, so I cherish the environment. And I don't think we should abuse it. I think we should have a balanced approach to our life, really. I cry when barns are torn down. I'm really sick on this stuff. So my problem though is when you say, well, this happens, you make a connection from point A to point B with very little evidence when it comes to wildfires. We have people living in areas that they never lived before, and incredibly remote terrain. And I've been to some of the parts of it. They're beautiful. Yeah. But for someone who believes in animals and wildlife, I mean, maybe that's where the animals and wildlife have to be, and probably not in these remote canyons that have always been dry.
Yeah, I mean, the fundamental reality about whether we're talking about
what the hell is going on right now,
wildfires or floods, is that these are human disasters. They're human-made disasters that are caused by human decisions.
Which means...
So this is a new one. This guy's saying that instead of sticking firm to the human-made disasters like the wildfires and the hurricanes and stuff, now this person here is suggesting that because of your decision-making is why we're spending so much in recovery costs, because you decided to live in a coastal region that has storms, and you decided to live somewhere where there's rivers that flood. So now it's almost like, okay, so we can't blame man for the climate, but we can blame man for making the decision to live in these areas that are costing us billions of dollars from natural disasters. This is rich here.
Meteorological events aren't human-made. A regular rain.
No, I'm talking about the cost to life and property. Those are human decisions, the decisions that we make of where to build, what kinds of building materials we use, but also the pollution that we put into the atmosphere. And collectively, as a society, we've made the decision to pump billions of tons of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere.
So, do you think we should basically immediately, go to 50%? I mean, some of the more radicals are cut by 50%.
Keep it in the ground. Some of them don't.
Yeah, stay in the ground.
Well, I mean, it really is... it should be a decision for the American people and for the world.
They're rejecting it in France, correct? I mean, they're rejecting the big...
They're rejecting it in France. It's spreading across Europe. Brazil's new government, is the foreign minister called it a Marxist hoax. Canada has a carbon tax rebellion. Donald Trump was criticized by French President Emmanuel Macron for promoting nationalism and pulling out of the UN Paris Agreement. And then a week later, Paris is ablaze. What Brad tries, he tries to call it poison weather. You can look at everything he just mentioned, wildfires, droughts, hurricanes, on every climate timescale, 50 years and beyond, they're either no trend or declining. That's how you look at the science. You don't look at it. California had much worse droughts in previous centuries. Global drought is showing no trends. And this is even buried in the UN reports. They can't even hype that kind of...
But then you see the icebergs and...
Okay, I want to stop that there. And he mentioned something about wildfires. And right now, we're talking about what man has done to the atmosphere. If we're going to talk about what man has done, and that we're pumping out all these man-made emissions, okay, that are creating these wildfires and all these other things too, that are created because of increased carbon. So here is a 5-year acres burnage graph that I just found on the net. And as you guys can see, 1922, 28, 34, 1940, we had a lot of wildfires. And I don't like this graph in particular because it stops at 2006, so maybe I'll find one that's spinning on wildfires. There's a really good graph out here, please forgive me, that shows that we were looking at a lot more wildfires. Here we go. I mean, look at these numbers. This goes up to 2016. You get the gist, though. I mean, it's not like 2017 and 18 went way up to the 300,000. But look at these. Look at the acres and the amount of fires that we've had. And 1926, 29. Now we're not at record CO2 like we are right now. So I'm really tired of some of these alarmists trying to blame man for the wildfires that we've seen. They've been awful. The last couple that we've had out there have been terrible the last 2 years. But when you look at the numbers, now, we can all tell you right now, this is 1, 2, 3, this is the million acres. 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million acres. So this is not in thousands, this is in the millions. Okay? And that is accurate. We haven't had more than 100, maybe possibly 500 to 600,000 acres burnt just in 2018 in Northern California and Southern California, maybe a little bit more. But that's about accurate. And that's what we reported on the last big fire that we had out there, the Camp Fire in Woolsey. So just wanted to point out really quick here in the middle of this debate kind of goes off topic here, and they all start dancing around. I'll probably stop it a little bit. But I just wanted to throw that at everybody. When you hear people trying to blame man or climate, man-made climate change for wildfires, take a look at how many acres burnt in 1932. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's part of that probably didn't help the Depression. 5 million acres? Unless I'm reading this graph wrong, which I doubt it.
Big pieces of ice coming off. Then you see the polar bear really lonely on a piece of ice. And I start to tear up and I cry. And I'm sure a lot of other people cry because it looks really awful. And we are changing the planet, with no doubt about it, correct?
Right,
we are changing.
See, and this is where these people don't know what they're talking about. If she's going to admit to crying to these commercials about polar bears dying, but on the same note, she believes that the climate change is a hoax, man-made. Make up your mind. Which side? Because if you think man-made climate change is a hoax, then you wouldn't buy these pictures of polar bears. And by the way, these chunks of ice that break off, like Larson B did this year or last year, those were scheduled breaks. That one, they've been watching that since 1996. So it wasn't like all of a sudden this ice shelf just broke off because of global warming. They knew this was going to break off. There's timing involved with these things. Anyway.
Changing the planet.
But here's the perverse thing. If we actually...
Species are being wiped out because we do dumb things.
Yes, but that's one thing we know how to do now is save species. One of the things...
Mari, I have to get you involved here. We're never going to get through this interview, but you do, or you used to, on WTF Sky, you would do mass die-off videos. And I just want to know your opinion. When you do these mass die-off videos, is the intention behind it to show everyone what man is doing to the environment, what man is doing to our species, or is this just you trying to show the world that these die-offs, unfortunately, are part of the cycle of life?
I have done so many mass die-off videos. I don't do them all the time because it's emotional to me to actually go through the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of events that happen in just a short time period. And we have some on our channel, and I think I have several on WTF Sky as well. It is a natural thing with a lot of these mass die-offs. It could be a lightning strike. It could be just disease. A lot of times it's just weird disease that spreads, like bird flu, algae blooms with the water. It could be anything, but the problem I have with these extremist, alarmist climate change people is they just want to point to mankind and make it your fault, so you have an emotion and an obligation to serve them and do as they say, which typically means getting in your pocket and just blindly paying these taxes and
because you're
filling
doing
their damn pockets.
You're doing it for the better of man, basically.
That's
like,
what
they're trying to convince you.
It's our fault, people. We gotta pay. And that is simply not the case.
Yeah,
I hate how they play with the emotions of people.
Oh, yeah.
Like, now it's like the reindeer are dying.
That's why
the polar bears are dying.
That's why
blah,
I got
blah,
you
blah.
involved with this, because I know you've made them, and you don't make these videos with the intentions of it's because of pollution, it's because of man-made climate change. These are just natural things that happen in the life cycle. And, as bad as they already are, we don't need to villainize them even more. Let's watch a little bit more of this. I don't know how much more I'm going to show this, actually, because like I said, I think this gets way off the rails. Did you have something else to add before I...
Well, I mean, Per Strandberg is in the chat, and he mentioned that he published on Wikipedia 10 years ago the graph from NASA GISS, the graph that showed 1910 to 2000, the temperature increase of 0.08. And he's showing he says now that the graph has changed to a 0.0. Also, he mentioned, and I completely agree with him, any climate scientists, if they can point to data from real world that show CO2 changes are important on temp, they can't answer. So if you actually ask them to actually point to the data from the real world that shows CO2 changes are more important on temperature, they cannot do it. And that is absolute fact.
Well,
they just can't.
Go figure.
They'll glorify these crazy papers, though, and try to skew the truth. And unless you read the paper, you won't understand what it's saying to see that it doesn't have factual... people will take a scientific paper and then skew it to their own truth when that truth is not necessarily right. And that's exactly what mainstream media does.
Oh, I know. I've been in several Twitter conversations where someone will read part of a paper that will mention that CO2, this, that, and then they'll forget to read 3 paragraphs down where it proves my point. So there's a lot of cherry picking involved. Let's see what else they have to say here. Mark, again, I wish Mark had a better opportunity to speak more about what his book stands for, what his website stands for, what this entire movement stands for.
One of the biggest success stories is we know even now how to do, when you do logging and other forests, how to do, instead of clear cutting vast swaths, they do what they call sustainable logging, and they cut different sections. But the bottom line is this: the carbon tax would actually increase emissions, because if you hamstring the developed world, the United States, Canada, Western Europe, all that's going to do is move industry over to China, India, places without that. And there's actually peer-reviewed studies and other studies showing that emissions for decades to come would go up. So even if that's your goal, it's the wrong way to go.
What's interesting, though, is that conservatives on this have a very little emotional appeal of their arguments. I mean, they don't sell their points well, and so kids come home from school and they're literally in tears because they're frightened to death that it's all coming down. And there was a really interesting moment at the Poland UN big plenary session on climate change where a little 15-year-old Swedish young woman made a very impassioned speech. Let's watch.
Our civilization is being sacrificed for the opportunity of a very small number of people to continue making enormous amounts of money.
Okay, shame on the UN, shame on Poland, shame on these people who are trying to scare you into their climate treaty by putting an innocent 15-year-old child up to read from a script that was written from some activist on global warming and climate change to help further, because look, the United States has done some damage to this treaty by Trump coming out and say how he opposes this, and now other countries are starting to fall in. Brazil, Saudi Arabia, Russia, Kuwait. There are other countries. Yemen is considering jumping out of this too. So that's only going to snowball. But this is, and you know, the words democracy now are above this poor child's in the video, basically. Again, politicized. Using this child is basically a human shield in politics. Because if you're against climate change, then that means you're against this little girl surviving and thriving for her future. That's what the left is trying to do. They're trying to get you to feel guilty for even denying the science. Because if you do, then you automatically are thrown in a category that doesn't care about this young lady's future or how she is going to continue to live in a world where, according to her in this speech, there are governments out there who are ignoring this climate treaty just to only make themselves richer. I know there's a lot of conspiracy theory out there. The government's corrupt. They're thieves. They're crooks. Whatever. They misspend the money here and there. Isn't that what this carbon tax is, though? Another tax to steal from the American people, from people around the globe. And is the law transparent enough to show you where these taxes are going to be going? Is it going to show you exactly what plan it went into to help change the climate back to normal? Just senseless. This is a waste of time. The amount of energy that it took, the actors that were hired. I'm sorry, this young lady is 15. She has no idea what she's talking about. And I'm not trying to disrespect her. She could be very intelligent. She could be a straight A student. But we all know that to understand climate, to understand what's going on, you need to experience it first off. And if you're in between the ages of 30 and 60 years old, chances are you've seen a good amount of climate in your lifetime to understand it just by experience alone. And then you can throw in the education, the years of training, or possibly that weather and climate has been your hobby, your passion, so you followed it all your life. So you have common knowledge. And I think it's just unfair to throw this child who should probably be thinking about, you know, going to dances and hanging out with her friends at the mall and getting her report done by the deadline. You know, instead, we have some leftist group activists that paid her family, I'm sure, good sum of money to get up there in front of millions of people and speak this sympathy speech to pull you by the heartstrings, to make you feel bad for ruining hers and others like her's future because you're ignoring the dangers of climate change. And what infuriates me about this all comes back to the IPCC report being fudged, being flawed. Scientists coming out and admitting that there's a lot of mistakes in this report. Some are not believing in the catastrophic climate change that's due in a few years that they say, just like Al Gore told us we wouldn't have ice caps in the north in 5 to 10 years. And here we are with some pretty decent ice growth as we speak. Taking a look at our sea ice extent, we're almost at 12 millions of square kilometers right now. We're at 11.956 as of December 18th. So I would have to assume that we'll be at that 12 million mark here very shortly. And winter has just begun. So we have another good 3 to 4 months of strong Arctic ice gain. Now, we are talking about future weather with this Arctic warming that is scheduled to happen in the Arctic, which is going to cause a major polar vortex disruption the first 2 to 3 weeks of January here in the lower 48 from the Midwest to the eastern part of the United States to the northeastern part. But temperatures right now, as far as the Arctic are going, the ice growth, you can see the ice extent is almost at its full capacity. And I remember looking at this last winter, it wasn't like that. It wasn't this full during the winter months. There was some ice gains and there was some ice loss as well. So we're already in better shape, in my opinion, than I thought we were last year at this time. Looks could be deceiving, though. That's all I'm going to show from that interview, guys. You can watch the rest. Like I said, they kind of get off topic later about it. And, you know, I'll let you guys decide. Here's a current radar look at that storm that we got going through the south right now. As you can see right now, parts of Alabama, Mississippi are getting hit as we speak. And this rain will continue to move towards the east coast. And let's just go ahead and go to the GFS and take a look of what we're expecting over the next several hours. This was started from, actually I want to reset this. Alright, so I think we're back. Sorry about that. The gremlins got to us once again. That was totally not us. We do apologize for the interruption. We were looking at the GFS forecast when we went off air last. White Christmas for West Virginia, Western Pennsylvania possibly, but look at the storms that we got forming here after Christmas. Another giant low pressure system across the middle of the United States, and this is a nice snowstorm that's developing for much of the United States. Here's that up and down weather. The Northeast, we're going to get drilled with some more rain right before the end of the month, but after that rainstorm we've got cold air behind it, but lots of high pressure. So we are watching a pattern, in my opinion, of what we would see during an El Nino with all that rain in the south and the way the cold air is just staying in the northeast and the northern parts of the United States. But snow chances will begin to increase as we go through January, but surprised to see the lack of snow so far, the far abundance of rain. Now this is going to be a pretty major snowstorm once we get this thing going here December 27th. South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Colorado, Minnesota, parts of Iowa. This is going to be a significant storm, and Minnesota into Wisconsin is going to be the story behind this one here, as we'll have to keep our eyes on that particular storm. That could be several inches of snow. But once that cold air is ushered in after Christmas, we get a lot of high pressure that's going to be the driver of keeping things from being so soggy, which the South absolutely needs the break. Possibility of some light snow by the 4th of January. But guys, looking at the map here on the 4th of January into the long-term future, looks pretty dry and looks pretty boring. So we get a pickup of storms right about now, and this will run all the way through the end of the month, the 28th of December. So tomorrow, Saturday, Sunday, there'll be the worst of the weather. Snow on the end of the weekend on the back end of this storm. Another quick spot of snow on Christmas Eve for New York and Pennsylvania. The Northwest, you guys will have plenty of snow moving in across the region through the next several days as that next system gets its act together. And the current jet stream, that is going to go far up into Canada and stay away from the Northeast. So no major snow systems yet, but we are still early, folks, and there is plenty of winter to go around. Taking a look at our snow depth, that says it all right there. The higher elevations are the winners of the snowfall. Hardly any snow for the US 48 if you look at this map. I mean, besides the higher elevations here in the Northwest, you look at the northern plains, 1 to 3 inches. The Northeast, 2 inches, 3 inches, 4 inches. Very scarce 5-inch, 6 inches of snow on the ground right now at this point. Let's take a look at temperatures over the next several days. That warm, mild air sticks around. That colder Arctic air that we saw moving in at the end of the month makes a push, but that warmer air wins and kind of hangs around a little bit longer than what was anticipated. So that colder Arctic air that we thought might have been seen by the end of this month, into January, is being delayed just a little bit longer. But a lot of people out there are predicting that this polar vortex is real and it's going to happen by the second week of January. We're going to start seeing some real cold air, especially here in the Northeast. Looking at the El Nino region, guys, this thing is pathetic. It is sitting at a 0.482 above baseline, which is not even at El Nino strength right now. It's been up and down, below and under El Nino strength for the past several days. And right now, this is a barely form of a Modaki El Nino. We already looked at the ice and the ice extent. And other than that, guys, that's all I have for us tonight on tonight's edition of the Grand Solar Minimum. Mari, did you have anything you'd like to close out before we head off the air tonight?
Yeah, actually, hold on here. It's been sort of crazy in the chat. Wow. So many new faces, Jake. Very interesting. Robert Strickland just did a super chat. He's asking about what I think about the geoengineering project called SCOPE. They're trying to simulate the volcanic eruptions to promote global cooling.
They don't need to do that.
I mean, they're just playing with fire, in my opinion.
That'll make things way worse.
And I just think they're doing these type of... There's also another geoengineering experiment. Isn't there like another one where they're trying to modify the weather to cool it?
No, that's part of it.
Is it a part of the same thing?
Yep.
Okay, so it's, to me, going to just be used as an excuse as to why it's cooling. Look, our experiment worked. It's cooling, even though we already are on the path of cooling. It's crazy.
This is the way for the AGW not to get egg on their face by making up these fake weather assignments of spraying aerosols to cool the planet when it's already happening on its own by nature of cycles.
And then... let me just go through so when we were having issues earlier about the notifications, because hold on, let me just try to get mine.
I'm back, guys. We're gonna go ahead and end the show. We are having internet issues. This is the second time we've been knocked offline in the last 15 minutes. So apparently we are spreading way too much truth here at the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Guys, thank you for tuning in once again. Please like and share, subscribe to our channel. But for the most part, guys, thank you once again for tuning in tonight. We'll be back Friday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. That's Friday night, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And then we'll do a show on Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. I believe Henrik will be joining us for that edition as well. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us tonight. Thanks for tuning in again, and we will talk soon.